Alrighty, so we're in my garage and I'm going to be doing a different set of brakes on this car. As you can see right now, we've got drums. We got some really cool wheels off of an old Charger that was in an accident that I was putting on this Javelin. And right now I've got stock drums. I've already swapped the driver's side over, but you can see, got the parts and other fun things over here lying around. We'll do a little quick walk around. You can see what the driver's side looks like. Alrighty. So I already got, like I said, the driver's side done. Driver's side has these guys on there. Nice. So I'm going to show you how to swap out to the wilwood brake system that I bought about a year ago, I believe, off of Jegs. I'll get to the part number and put it at the bottom of the video so that way you guys can do it too. It's a 71 Javelin SST that I'm swapping in a big block 440 out of a other Charger. I already had it in and out a couple times now. I've got it all mounted. I built my motor mounts and gonna put those suckers in there once I get them all kind of cleaned up and painted. There's some things I got to do to the engine just to make sure it fits in there perfectly, but it was in there. I got all that figured out, but I figured while I was waiting, I'm going to tinker and kind of fix the engine bay. I do the brakes because I've been putting it off for a long time because I'm lazy. Swapped to a different master cylinder for this. It's got a power brake system on it too, so hopefully it'll make it a little bit braker easier because I'm going to turn this into a little bit of a daily driver is the plan. So I'm going to pull the wheel off and we'll see what we're working with. Okay, so I've already got the nut off there, as you can see here. So it's just on there as a spindle, but it should just walk itself off pretty easily because that's all that's holding on. So you'll pull it off, and then behind that will be the brake assembly. So this is what you're seeing here. You got 4 nuts, 1, 2, 3, 4. You got to pull that off, and then you got to pull the brake hose off the back right there. Brake hose is just back here. You can see it kind of in the dark, but you pull that off, you pull those 4 nuts off, and then the whole assembly kind of pulls off, and you'll be left with the spindle. And then you'll have 4 bolts protruding out the back of the spindle this way. You're going to need to pull all that off. You're going to actually have to pull the spindle off too. I recommend cleaning up the spindle a little bit so you can apply fresh grease, make it sure it's no score, there's no issues. Shouldn't be. These things are pretty tough, but if they are, you want to get a new spindle. Make sure you get it for the same car. And then you're going to have you're going to clean the surface before we start putting stuff back on. So I'm going to start doing that. Just basically pull the 4 bolts off. Maybe you got to tap them with a little bit of hammer to get them back out. Maybe apply some force screwing it out, but it comes out pretty easy. And then we'll pull the whole assembly off. Okay, so spindle's bare. I just pulled that off and kind of set that to the side. I hate pulling these brake lines off, and they're bitched in half, so I'm going to do that in a minute. But basically, you got your whole spindle here. Now, this one's actually pretty wiggly, so it might just wiggle off, but we're going to take a look here in just a second. I got to reposition. I got a bad left knee that I can't really leave bent for too long, so it's being a pain in the ass. So I generally will apply a wee bit of force. Okay, that's not going to work, so then I apply more force. There we go. There we go. Now, one of the things to remember with this, at least for me, is I'm not reusing any of these bolts. I normally wouldn't pound on something if I'm going to have to reuse them, but I'm not reusing them. So, as you can see, the spindle comes off, and yay! Spindle's off. Comes off in one piece. I'm setting everything I may have to reuse over here, like the nuts and things, axle nuts and things like that, but bolts don't slide out. Well, that guy won't. I have to turn the whole assembly, but you catch my drift. May have to turn the assembly a bit. You're finding this to be a pain in the ass, but I'm gonna get these off. Okay, so now with everything out, and I got the lower steering arm down there, I'm gonna clean everything up. Get it as kind of just, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be exposed to the elements, so it's not like it's necessary to be perfectly clean. But I'm going to clean off some of the old grease, clean off some of the surface, make sure all of the holes are rust-free because one of those bolts was a pain in the ass to get in and out. And then I'm going to put on my caliper mount. For this application, I've noticed that the caliper mount can't go on exactly the way it's meant to be. I'm going to show you kind of what I did to make it work, which it does. It's just a little bit more of a pain in the ass to put on and off, but it'll work. And then you obviously would have maybe a different application for your car, but you'll figure it out. Okay. So one of the things that I recommend when you do this is kind of test fit some stuff just to make sure you got everything lined up the way it should, and just throw one of the bolts in there so you have a good pivot point. Put a nut on the back. Just doesn't have to be tight, just to kind of line everything up, makes things easier to put the rest of it on. Don't tighten anything up until you've gotten everything on there, right? Obviously, I don't have a lock washer on that bolt right now. You'll notice that I went bolt through rather than bolt through the other way. My reason for that is it is much easier to pound on the head of a bolt from the front to get it through the holes versus the other way. So that's why I did that. It doesn't really matter either way. It's going to be the same amount of exposure. And you'll notice that it doesn't come close to the rotor. This kit, I'm not sure if it came with the wrong hardware or if it came with, it was meant for a different application, but it comes with a spacer, which you can kind of see is in between. And from measuring the other side, which I'll show you how I did that, it wouldn't have worked without the spacer. I don't believe that this kit was actually specifically for this application. I believe it's for a different kind of brake system, but I made it work, so obviously you can too. You could obviously have changed spindles to make it work correctly, but you'll notice that the caliper is actually on backwards. I'm going to show you how we're going to make that work here too later. The other thing is, obviously I cleaned up the spindle. It's a lot shinier. There's none of that grease on there because we're going to apply new grease. I also recommend greasing the bolts as they're going through those holes. It's much easier just to shove them through. I just have some generic little, some high temp wheel bearing grease. Use that for everything. It's not going to hurt anything. In fact, it'll keep it nice and rust free. So throw a little bit of that on the bolts as you're driving them through. It makes it a lot easier to put the nuts on the back, and it makes it a lot easier to slide them through the holes. I'm going to do the other 4. I'm going to get some lock washers on those, and we'll go from there. Alrighty, well, you got this on now, so you can see I got all the bolts on there. I got my bracket on there. And again, I know the bracket's on backwards. I'm fully aware of that, but I'm going to show you why I did that for this applications here in a minute. The next step you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set up the rotating assembly. So you got your spindle mounted here. One thing you're going to want to double check is your bolt pattern on this because it's got a universal. So just make sure that you're selecting the right ones. Easy way to do that is take the wheel you're going to use and or the brake you're going to use, kind of lay it on top of each other. The old brakes lay it on top of each other, and just kind of, it's pretty obvious once you have that set up that you'll know which ones go where. This comes out of there, so that's where everything comes through. You got your old new bearing, whoop, sits right in there. That's the external one, and then you've got your internal, just like a, God, I can't remember they say what they're called, seal. You got your internal seal, and then you've got your internal bearing right here. So internal bearing goes on the inside, obviously. Make sure that you go like this. You got to have a flat surface like that, so don't put them in like that. They won't fit, but I've seen people do stupid shit, so just make sure you're careful there. And then put this one on the inside. You put that on the outside, very inside piece, so that's gonna line up there in the very back there over that. You can see that big kind of gets bigger here. So it torques in right there, boom, that's where your bearing sits, that's where your other bearing sits, and then that sits up against that, so it got a good seal. But basically all that kind of goes together with that part, and then your rotor here, and then your caliper goes on that. So I'm gonna set that up and kind of get you some steps by steps as we do that. Okay, so I got my studs put on. That's the bolt pattern that it's supposed to be. So I checked it with the wheel and I compared it with my brake caliper. So now you got your rotor here. Now the rotor is going to go on the face like so with that plate. So we'll grab that plate. So now we're going to bolt the rotor onto the faceplate. Now the faceplate, it's got a indentation where the hump is either going this way or it's going this way. You want the hump going outwards towards the wheel on this application, the way I'm setting it up. The instructions that came with it pointed to it this way. Now I'm looking at it and I'm wondering if I did it the other way, if I wouldn't have to use that spacer, but it doesn't really matter. It shouldn't hurt too much the car the way it's going to handle. It's a 1/4 inch, so I don't have to run a wheel spacer this way, which is great. So put a little Loctite on each one of these guys. There's stars. I don't know if you can see that. Yep. There's stars. I'm sorry, I'm doing this on an iPhone. I don't have my camera set up yet. So you're doing this on a, you're going to hit with a little bit of Loctite. Remember, try to torque them in a star pattern. And then once that's on, then you're going to bolt that guy to it. And it's got another set of nuts that comes with that in that container over there. Those will bolt on. I also recommend Loctiting all of this because you can always take it back off, but the Loctite will make sure that it doesn't rattle free. And these are your brakes, so you want to be safe. So I'm going to put those on real quick, put a little Loctite on there. And then right before we put it, the bearings in, I'll show you how we get those on. I'm not going to show you how to pack a bearing. There's a million videos online about how to pack a bearing. It's pretty self-explanatory, but we're going to go from there. Okay, so when you're all done, this is what it should look like. You should have a set of those and a set of those. And I Loctited all of them, so it shouldn't come off. Torque them down. I don't believe the instructions gave me a torque setting, so tighten them down. I mean, they should be grade 8 bolts. They're not going anywhere. Don't strip them. Don't be stupid. But you got these little star-tipped bits. I bought them at, like, I think a Harbor Freight. They're cheapos, but they work really good for this kind of stuff. So you can run them on a drill, makes them really fast. Next step is going to be the bearing. So I'm going to pack that fucker, shove it right in there, seal it, flip it over to the other side, and then I'm going to put it on that guy. Okay, so once you get that axle nut on the, or that spindle nut on the outside there, that's what your rotating assembly should look like. Should spin. Now, I got this tool. I don't really use it, but it is a tool you can buy pretty cheap. And it's actually a way to test the torque on your on that nut to make sure it's torqued to the right setting. Now you can find online or in a book that what the torque setting is, but I don't know. I kind of just check it. And here's the thing: I cannot stress this enough. Drive it for a bit, take it home, and check them again. I've built a couple race cars, and every time I put one of those on, they work themselves loose. They always work themselves just a tad bit loose. So put it all on, put everything on. Come back and check it in, because one thing I found out when I was putting this whole car together, which was super cool, was this sucker was loose. That's an important piece, and the nut is barely on the bottom. So obviously somebody here previously worked on the car, so don't trust anything that you can't verify yourself, and verify it twice. There's nothing wrong with taking a wheel off, jacking up the car, checking everything in the suspension and your brakes. Man, you don't want to lose those. You will be very depressed and hopefully not dead, but you got to be really careful with that kind of stuff. So next thing is going to be, you're going to put on a rotator, which is that little fella right there, if you can see it, and a cotter pin. And then we get to put this guy on the outside. And then we put on the caliper, and we'll go from there. So I've already put this on once, and I still screwed it up and put it on. So I had to take the main nut out on the other way, because if you use the stock washer, that guy, this doesn't have enough clearance to screw on. So I had to take it all apart, re-grease, put it back on, and then tighten it down again. So that was fun. Next step is going to be putting the caliper on. Now, caliper, like I said, is going to go on a little different than it's supposed to. So this is the only trick kind of thing that I did. So as you can see, it's got a threaded spot there for the caliper to go on. So ideally, you put the caliper on the back side of that. Well, you can't do that. It won't have clearance right for the pads. So what you do then, at least the way I did it, was I went to Parker's Hardware, bought some longer bolts that are Allen's, which are better in my opinion. And then I'm going to thread those through the caliper, put a nut on it, and there's already clearance with a lock washer on there, and then it'll be on. And then I'm going to show you, at least my experience, the coolest way to put on pads ever. I haven't seen this on any of the cars that I've worked on yet, but again, I'm a rookie when it comes to most things. So this is going to be the first time I've ever put these brake pads on, and they are amazing to put on. Way better than most of the cars I've ever worked on. So I'm going to start working on that. I'll kind of show you what I'm doing along the way. Okay, so I got the caliper started, and you're going to see what I'm talking about when I put this on here. So you can see the backside here where it's got space now for the brake pads. Well, I had to do this on the backside. I don't know if you can see that, but see the bolts are kind of still sticking out, but they thread through the inside, and then if you look down the hole, you see there's a gap there. I'm going to be able to put a nut on there with a lock washer, and then those are bolted on, and then we'll put the pads on. So I'm going to work on that now. Okay, so as you can see here, I've got my pads on. Now the pads actually slide in the top and through, and you got a cotter pin here, which is really cool. Awesome way to do it. As you can see here, I've got my bolt going through with a nut on the other side. Now I put this whole thing on exactly the same way as I did the other one. Can't stress this enough. 100% exactly the same way. But as anyone that knows cars and works on cars will know, sometimes things don't work the same way. Well, unfortunately, that pad is rubbing and this pad's not. Which really freaking sucks. So I gotta actually take a lot of this apart, shim it out a bit, so my pad doesn't rub here, which it is, and it isn't touching here. And we gotta have a little bit better clearance. So I'm going to do some shimming. Probably between the axle or the spindle shaft and the mount. Which means I got a lot of stuff to take apart, but it goes apart. I mean, honestly, it comes apart pretty quick. So don't get too discouraged if you put it all together and kind of determine, well, shoot, I didn't do it right. But that's okay. That's life. And I'm showing you this to show you that I'm an idiot. as is generally the case. So I'm going to take that apart, put the shims back on, put it back all together, and then I'll have the brakes floating like they should. They'll spin freely like the other wheel does, and I'll be done. I'm not going to show you all that because I really don't think it's necessary for anybody to see. I think you can figure that out on your own. Then I got to take my my flex line, put that on. I'm going to show you some more videos of this car coming forward. Again, it's a 71 Javelin SST that I bought about 1.5 years, 2 years ago before I moved here, and been kind of slowly working on it. I've actually had a couple engines in and out of this thing already. Had a 350 Chevy in here and made a lot of people mad online, but I don't really care what they think. And then it just happened to come upon a 440 Dodge, so that was pretty cool. I'll show you a couple things about the Dodge that I had to do to make it fit in here and the mounts that I made. Just using a Harbor Freight welder, cheapo guy. Got a driveline made at a local shop that's a great shop, i5 Driveline in Vancouver. If you ever need anything, I recommend them for drivelines. The guy's an excellent dude. Does a really great job of taking probably like 6 different drivelines for cars that I've swapped engine ins and out of that I've needed drivelines shortened or lengthened for, and he did a great job. He actually built me a brand new driveline for this completely because the one that I had was shot. This has the rear end out of that Charger in it too, so I got a limited slip in this sucker. And yeah, so a couple things here and there, but we'll get it going. And put it on the ground, and then I'm going to plumb the brakes. I'm going to clean up the engine bay a bit and go from there. Like they say, like and subscribe, I guess, to the videos if you want to see more about this car, or if anything else you going on. Send me any recommendations for videos you guys like to see. There'll be better videos going forward. I'm not going to do everything on an iPhone. I just wanted to kind of get this started, get some stuff out there, and I was going to do this, so I figured it'd be cool to put on video. Peace out, dogs, y'alls.